Hey gang, it's Chris Angel coming at you for another episode of Marketing for the Rest of Us. And today we're going to talk about overwhelm as it relates to the to-do list that comes with big vision, big goals, and important work. If you have important work in the world, which is ultimately who I'm speaking to in this show, you know that relatively quickly in the beginning, it's exciting, right? We're like, oh, let's think about all the change and all the big things we're going to do in the world. And then, which is the fun part. And the minute you start to go down the road of implementation, your to-do list gets long, fast. I mean, it's just, there's a lot. Now, there's some ways to manage that a little bit. You can jump into programs, right? Like for example, I have programs that help people create structure around their important work. But even with frameworks and programs, there is still work to do. You don't get a hall pass from all the work there is to do. And so I think we know that. We know we don't get a hall pass. And so what that creates is overwhelm because we're like, crap, I can't not do it. I have to do it. But I'm so overwhelmed by the to-do list of it all that I don't know where to start. Now, from that place, we start to second guess ourselves because we're like, wow, I'm overwhelmed by this to-do list. We start to implement, and then we see all the different ways we could do it. We're like, maybe I shouldn't do it this way. Maybe I should do it that way. I kind of like parts of this, but maybe I like parts of that. Do you see, like the whole thing leads to overwhelm about how we're going to do the work. So that second guessing then leads to a complete shutdown where you're like, man, I have a huge to-do list. I'm second guessing myself so many times that now I just don't even want to play. Like I just want to stop. And it's not that you want to stop because you don't believe in your important work. That's what makes it even worse is you don't want to stop because you're so connected to the mission and vision of the work that you're here for. But you're so overwhelmed by what steps to take that that makes the stopping or the shutting down even more painful. So how do we deal with that? Like that is, I can tell you that big to-do lists and overwhelm is sometimes just part of the implementation of a big vision. So I want to share some thoughts that came up today in a group call I had with some participants of mine that it was really good. I just want to give you a couple places to look if you're feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of your vision and your mission. So the first thing is in the middle of overwhelm, like what if you have, I'm just trying to give you an example here. So one of the things I do is I help people create programs. These programs that they create are designed to share their message with the world, right? You have a message, you get to create a program that delivers that message to those who are ready to hear it. And the challenge in building programs is that you can, at first glance, it's like, oh, this is exciting. I see it. I understand it. I get it. But when you start to create your own program, it can be overwhelming because there are a lot of different ways it could go. You could build the same program 5 different ways depending on what you choose to focus on in the delivery of that content. And so it becomes overwhelming in the second guessing of it all. And so today in the conversation, one of the things that came out was like, if you have a structure, just any structure at all that you've built, sometimes what we do is we second guess ourselves in the creating of the structure of something, right? And so we burn a lot of energy and we add to the overwhelm because we're trying to tweak and fine tune the structure of things. But what I want to tell you, and this is what I said today with the group, is that the structure, use whatever structure you have. The life of your program or the life of your message does not come from the structure. The structure simply gives you a place to speak from. It gives you a place to breathe life into the conversation. So if you are, whatever the important work is that you're up to, what I want you to know is the important part of the work happens in the exchange you have with other humans. It's not so much the exact thing you say, it's in the exchange of things you say with others. Okay, so if you have something already implemented, you can stop. I mean, obviously I haven't seen what it is you're implementing, but you can stop trying to fine tune it 100 different ways. Use what you have. think the word the way I said it today was like MacGyver. You can MacGyver it, right? Like MacGyver could take duct tape and bubble gum and like turn it into something that was productive and effective and all that. You can take whatever structure you've already implemented and created, and you can breathe life into it with the interaction you have with others. Okay? So in a program, you might not feel super confident or solid in the presentation of it. You're like, I don't know, there's something off about the presentation of it. I'm not feeling super connected to it. But rather than try to perfect the structure, use whatever imperfect structure you have to find an inroad to a meaningful conversation with those who come through that program. Some of you are in more less transformational coach spaces. As I've seen some of you on here are real estate agents. And so I'm thinking like, you might have the imperfect listing presentation. Rather than trying to tweak your listing presentation 50 ways to Sunday, use whatever you have and breathe life into the interaction you have with the client sitting across the table from you, right? It's never about the structure, but it's often the structure that gives us the meltdown. Do you hear that? That's really good. Do you hear that? It's often the structure that we're trying to implement that causes us to melt down. But it is not the structure that breathes life into the exchange, the interaction. So once you can get that straight, once you can be clear about life comes from the interaction, not the structure, then you can be more appropriate with the structure, meaning you don't have to overdevelop the structure. And you can be more appropriate with the interaction because that's where the life is. The life is in the interaction. I've seen people come in so attached to their slides in a PowerPoint presentation, or so attached to a listing presentation, or so attached to whatever the structure is that they're actually missing the life in it. They're not creating any life in it because they're not connected to the human in it. All important work has a human involved in it, at least in this tribe. And structure, as it relates to having structure that can hold the bigness of your vision, having that structure simply is there to give you a place to start, a place to interact, a place to engage. But the real engagement happens in the conversation that you have with the other human in it. Okay, so I'm sort of freestyling here today because I'm trying to find words for what happened today in that conversation. What I know is that it's easy when you have a big vision to get overwhelmed by all the implementation. I think the implementation piece often takes us to structure, and structure is where we often melt down. That's a pretty good linear thought process there, right? Big vision leads to a big to-do list, leads to us having to implement structure, and structure is where we melt down. Yeah, that's pretty succinct. So in that, you don't have to have the meltdown if you stay connected to where the life is. And the life is actually in the interaction with other humans, okay? So regardless of how big your to-do list is, you are going to feel more life in the work of it all by staying connected to other humans and breathing life into the interaction between you and them, okay? Now, knowing that, you can use structure as simply that. It's just structure. It's just boundaries. It's just a place to start, okay? So there you have it. That's it for today, gang. Thanks for hanging out with me in this episode of Marketing for the Rest of Us. Here's to you implementing your big vision and staying connected to the other humans that are a part of it. See you tomorrow.